Thank you so much, Ms. Wells. I will call this meeting to order of the Senate Judiciary Committee on March 31st of 2021. Would the secretary please take the roll?
Vice Chair Canizaro.
She is on her way. If you please mark her present when she arrives, I will also try to make a note of it.
Senator Orenshall.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go back to Senator Canizaro because she's here.
Vice Chair Canizaro.
Here.
Senator Orenshall. Senator Harris.
Here.
Senator Settlemyre. Senator Hansen.
Here.
Senator Pickard.
Here.
Senator Orenshall. Senator Settlemyre. Chair Scheibel.
Here, thank you. We seem to be having some technical difficulties. Please mark Senator Orenshall present. Looks like he just logged back on. Senator Settlemyre is on his way, so also mark him present when he arrives. I'll try to make a note of it as well. Oh, now we have Senator Orenshall here twice, so maybe that could count for Senator Settlemyre's absence. Also, I want to let the record reflect that we have both of our fantastic LCB staff members here, Patrick Guinan, our policy analyst, Nicholas Anthony, our committee counsel. We are very appreciative to have you here. And on today's agenda, we have one bill hearing, and that is SB 236, which will be presented by Senator Harris, along with some co-presenters. And for those of you listening at home, I do anticipate that there will be significant testimony in several positions. I don't know what positions, and we will try to get through everybody. This meeting does have to conclude at 3 p.m. today due to scheduling, but we will keep an eye on the clock and keep an eye on the queue and make sure that everybody has a chance to weigh in. And if you are not able to weigh in via telephone, please, please, please send us your written comments. You can email them, you can fax them, you can text them to me, and I'll put them in the record. And with that, I will turn it over to Senator Harris to present SB 236.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel and members of the Judiciary Committee. I am Dallas Harris, and I represent Senate District 11 in the southwest part of Clark County. It's my pleasure to present Senate Bill 236 with you all today. If you bear with me for 1 second, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get started. All right. Can I get a thumbs up if everybody can see it? Lovely. Okay. Senate Bill 236. There are 3 parts to this bill. We have the early warning system, traffic stop reporting, and I've requested an interim study. Early warning system. So we know that our criminal justice system is not blind or bias-free. I believe the saying is, we all have bias and we're all unaware of it. As such, I'm proposing that a system be established to measure specific criteria that, when present, indicate that an officer is succumbing to bias. This bias can cause acts that may put the law enforcement agency at stake or at risk for substantial monetary damages. An early warning system specifically is designed to track indicators of bias and can reduce the agency's liability and protect it from issues that can be avoided. This system can also help to improve an officer's performance and help them understand when and where they're exhibiting bias. We can utilize training and counseling, additional supervision to help an officer realize when bias may exist and to provide strategies and tools for what that officer can do to become more aware of the existing bias and use a more equitable and objective lens when making decisions. The proposed system would have police departments look at specific indicators that help a department identify and intervene at a time when risk is lowest. This is not a system that is punitive or designed to be used against officers. The proposed early warning system has the following elements. So it tracks and measures incidents of bias indicators. For example, a large number of citizen complaints, a large number of improper searches, how often an officer resorts to the use of force, or any other indicator that an officer has like a negative attitude towards community policing or other things that may enhance relations between law enforcement and the community. It also tracks other problematic behavior that can indicate when someone's likely to exhibit bias prior to that bias being used to inform decisions on the job. This gives law enforcement agencies the data and tools to address the indicators at an appropriate level for the officer, which starts again with increased supervision and training or counseling. Finally, proposed legislation gives posts the discretion to adopt any regulations necessary to carry out any of these provisions. Again, the idea here is that police departments can take their expertise and put together indicators that they believe will exhibit someone who might be displaying bias and offer some curative measures before some serious harm comes to fruition. Do warning systems work? Well, we trust the Doppler 10,000 to indicate what the weather is outside. We all know it's not likely, nor does it always come to fruition in the way it was forecast, but it prepares us for extreme events by measuring the temperature and pressure and other indicators that may result in a catastrophic event. The early warning system used in law enforcement has the same purpose. We want to help leaders identify potential problems and to intervene so that these problems do not become catastrophic. It outlines specific measures, but allows for supervisory organizations and regulators to use best practices and to adjust the behavior indicators that are best result in preempting these kind of bad behaviors. The second part of the bill is related to traffic stops. Data that's currently collected does not have enough information for analysis and may not be addressing issues that were reported to this very body in 2003. For people to feel that justice is being equally applied, we must be able to demonstrate equity through data. The last study done regarding racial profiling of traffic stops was a 2001 interim study resulting in a report presented to the legislature in 2003, which indicated grave disparities in who was stopped, what happened after the stop, including who was handcuffed and who was subsequently arrested. At that time, Black males made up about 6% of the population in Nevada, but were about 15% of the traffic stops. Generally, these types of overrepresentations are apparent across all kinds of racial groups and jurisdictions who participated in the study. As a result of the study, internal changes and procedures may have changed, but there's no evidence of that change in the policy. So it's imperative that the legislature kind of take another look at this in an aggregate sense and get some statistical analysis done on whether these biases exist in traffic stops or not, so that we can actually address if there's a problem, and if there is, figure out the best way to solve it. Most important piece of this change is that we can standardize information that can be used to make qualitative change in policies and procedures inside agencies. In order to understand all of the issues of concern, we need to be more specific about what we're collecting, make sure officers are trained in the right way to collect the data, and report it consistently. What you all see in the bill in front of you is a centralized data collection system where police officers will be able to use their existing traffic stop infrastructure to add this data. And so this will not require police departments to go out and buy new software. It will not require them to write the same ticket 2 different times. In the past, when we did the study, police officers were writing these things on index cards and handing them in. This is a much better system. We also didn't do the real qualitative statistical analysis on this data that this bill will allow for and call for. Now, at this time, before I move on, I want to acknowledge that we have a little bit of work to do on the traffic stop language, just to ensure that we're capturing the right type of traffic stops. This is not designed to require police officers to write down this information if they're stopping someone in order to divert them from some hazard in the road, for example. I also am going to look forward to an amendment that will be able to make some of this aggregate, anonymized data available to the public for analysis as well. And it's really important that we understand bias in these traffic stops, in profiling. The proposed changes in this bill would work together to create some behavioral change and better policing. Agencies will be able to identify potential issues up front and collecting comprehensive data so that issues can be abated and best practices can be employed uniformly across the state will only create a more effective justice system. And the last piece of the bill is related to how we use policing in society, right? The thing I'm always reminded of is the fact that, you know, for medical issues, we send EMTs. For a gas leak, you call your gas company. For a fire, you call the fire department. Any other crisis under the sun, to send them into situations where they don't have the tools necessary to address the actual crises at hand, and they don't handle it perfectly. Police officers are by no means social workers. They are by no means psychiatric nurses. They have tools on their tool belt. They have tools that they are trained on to address certain issues. And so I'm looking to have an interim study on how we can better align our crisis response to the actual crisis. I believe doing all of these things will help prepare Nevada for the future. So often we create policy in retrospect. While it's important for agencies to be able to adjust in an appropriate way, we have policies that are held over from the civil rights era of the 1960s. Kids today don't even know how to address an envelope to send it in the mail. Our way of thinking and doing has to adopt at the rate of the people we serve. We also know that in Nevada, we've had a boom in population growth, changing demographics, changing technology, require faster and more efficient response from law enforcement because situations are changing and becoming more complex. I'll go ahead and conclude that early warning systems are used for human resources to weather and to allow agencies to prepare for imminent threats. It relies on clear, consistent data to measure any potential bias. And if that results in damage, liability has to be appropriately assigned. Nevada's law enforcement agencies will operate better if we develop an early warning system to preempt issues, provide some accountability if egregious violations happen. I'll go ahead and note as well at this point, Las Vegas Metro has an early warning system in place. And so this bill would not require any police department that already has an early warning system to create one different than what they're already doing. It was really important to me to allow police departments to take into account the factors they feel necessary because frankly, they're the experts on policing. I am not. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen now if I can figure out how to do that. So give me just 1 second, and then I will turn it over to Nisa from Forced Trajectory. Oh, yay, they did it for me. Thank you, BPS. I will turn it over to Nisa from Forced Trajectory, and I also have a special guest, Miss Ackery, who will hop on and tell her story as well. Nisa?
Thank you, Senator Harris. I'm going to interrupt really quick to let the Secretary know that Senator Settlemyre has arrived, otherwise I will forget. And now we can focus on what Ms. Sun has to say.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Nisa Sun, and I am the co-founder of the Forced Trajectory Project. My name spelling is NISSATZUN. Forced Trajectory Project is a media and public relations organization dedicated to advocating for survivors and families impacted by police violence. For the last 12 years, we have been deeply immersed in communities impacted by police violence nationwide, and for the last 5 years, we have been focusing on Las Vegas. In that time, we have advocated for over 20 local cases of police violence, investigating what happened, what resources and needs these families and survivors have, and creating media to help victims and survivors in the midst of their traumas piece together their narratives. I believe Senator Harris reached out to me to speak on this critical piece of legislation, AB 236, because of the work we have put into understanding police violence in the Las Vegas community. AB 236 is a critical piece of legislation for this critical time, and it's been critical since way before the killing of George Floyd. AB 236 will help hopefully create avenues for police accountability. Early warning systems, I can't express to you how important this is. And despite the fact that Metro already has one, I would say that that needs to be revisited. The purpose of implementing an early warning system is to catch bias and problematic behaviors exhibited by police officers before the bias and behaviors result in a more dire situation, like seriously injuring a civilian or even killing them. The reason why I support this measure so staunchly is because of the 20 local cases we have worked on. We have identified multiple cases where the same officer was responsible for killing a civilian in more than one incident. Rafael Olivas was killed on July 14, 2011, after his mother, Alma Chavez, called the crisis intervention team for help because he was having an emotional breakdown. He was killed within 2-3 minutes upon Metro's arrival. Alma Chavez saw the whole incident. She was denied witness testimony, detained in her house, searched immediately after she saw her son take his last breath. On April 22, 2012, 9 months later, Officer Christopher Grievous, and one of the officers involved in the killing of Rafael Olivas, was involved in another shooting, killing a Black woman, a mother of 2 teenage girls, a social worker, a special needs teacher. Her name was Charmel Edwards. Had Grievous' involvement in Olivas' death, or perhaps previous problematic behaviors he exhibited, prompted a red flag through this early warning system, maybe Charmel Edwards and Rafael would be here today. Another example involves a recent case you all might be familiar with. Rex Wilson of the Olala Sioux tribe from the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, a former U.S. Marine, a businessman, a husband, and father of 9 Native American children, was shot 36 times on October 12, 2016. Officer John Squio and Christopher Gowans are 2 Metro officers involved in that shooting. They were also involved in the fatal shooting of Brian Keith Day the previous year in July of 2015. And recently it has been released that John Squio was the officer who shot non-lethals at Jorge Gomez, a Black Lives Matter protester who was open carrying, which caused Gomez to run for his life, only to be shot 19 times by 4 other Metro officers on June 1st, 2020. Other cases that have officers involved in repeat fatal use of force incidents, the killing of Tanner Chamberlain, Thomas McHenry, and Pedro Ramirez. And these are just, really scraping the surface of the 20 cases that we've looked at. Other sections of AB 236 also offer more avenues of accountability, including data collection of traffic stops that will be reported to the Department of Public Safety and implementing studies on crises response and policing. My hope is that an amendment will be added to allow the aggregated data to be available to the public. As we work with many families across the nation who we have been able to witness ourselves how aggregating and analyzing traffic stop data can support in identifying bias in the patterns and practices of police departments. The Racial and Identity Profiling Act that was passed in 2015 in California has helped the state identify significant racial bias for African Americans driving in California. It is my hope that AB 236 can support our efforts for transforming policing in Nevada, ultimately putting the safety of our citizens at the forefront of policing. Thank you everyone for giving us the space and time to share our thoughts. Thank you, Senator Harris, for your amazing efforts to uplift the voices of those directly impacted by police violence and inviting our survivors and victims to the table. I truly hope your colleagues learn from your example. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Chair Scheibel, if it's okay with you, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Acree at this point to just speak a little bit. If she could get her camera on and unmute, that'd be great. Please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Senator Harris, for providing me the opportunity to speak on behalf of my family and to support this bill. My name is Tina Cree. I'm a war veteran with distinct honor and deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan, and nothing in those war zones really prepared me for the body cam footage of my uncle, Byron Williams, who was murdered by Metro Police Department on September 5th of 2019. His death was ruled a homicide, and we do have a civil case that's going to be pending. So he was riding his bicycle to the gas station when he was either racially or biasly profiled, which should have been a minor offense of not having a light on his bicycle turned into his death. He was initially chased by a police car. He complied and he surrendered. The officers pinned him to the ground. Edit body cam footage shows officers on their knees. He started pleading for his life. He started saying, "I can't breathe." In the fact-finding review, it was told to us that he said that he could not breathe over 21 times. Instead, his cries were unanswered, and the officers viciously attacked him using vulgar languages. A female officer told him, "Ain't no one coming for you." There was a male officer saying, "Get up or we're going to drag you." And that's exactly what they did. They drug him to a different area. On one of the body cameras, it shows an officer asking, "Is he breathing?" Instead of an officer using his hands or his palm to check his pulse, the officer used his foot to check to see if my uncle was breathing. At that time, all the body camera footages were turned off, and it was turned off for a period of time. I'm not sure how long it was turned off. Once it was turned on, the ambulance was on the scene and CPR was being administered. Please forgive me, it's really hard to talk about what happened to my uncle. So the hope of this bill would be that the data collections, the statistics, and the analysis would prevent, any persons or a person of color from being racially profiled and being killed. And hopefully those warning signs would prevent an officer to do what they did to my uncle, right? Just using vulgar languages and showing those type of bias that we've seen on the redacted footage on that. That's all that I have to say. Thank you, Senator Harris.
No, the thanks should come from us to you. We really appreciate you being here and sharing your story. And I want to send out another set of thanks to committee members for paying attention and being here and listening as well. And also another set of thanks to all of the partners that I've had in this endeavor to get this bill to the place where it's at. That includes Las Vegas Metro, Washoe County Sheriff's Office, the Nevada Police Union, NAPSO, the ACLU, Force Trajectory, Battleborn, all of the groups who have worked together. So thank you all so much. And Chair Scheibel, before I turn it over for questions, I would just ask that members direct their questions to me on this bill, as my two guests here are not the experts on the legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Harris, for your presentation. Thank you, Ms. Sun and Ms. Acri, for joining us. I really do consider it our privilege to get to hear your stories firsthand, because we know that they are difficult to talk about, and we know that you choose to be here, even after all that you've been through. And so I really do take that to heart and appreciate the additional sacrifice to help us understand where you're coming, not just understand where you're coming from, but what you've been through. And so these conversations are very important. We appreciate you being here. And like Senator Harris said, you are, well, as Senator Harris alluded to, you're welcome to stay on the Zoom. You're also welcome to log off if you want to, while Senator Harris fields some questions about the bill, and then we will go to testimony in support, opposition, and neutral. With that, I will go ahead and take the first question from a member of the committee, Senator Settlemyer.
Sorry about that, Madam Chair. Sometimes people call at the most inopportune times. Thank you both, everyone, for their testimony today. It's troubling, the personal stories that have occurred. I don't know what to say. I needed to get into the crux of the bill, though, is, sounds like some of these stories, did they all happen in Nevada, or where did some of these stories occur? Just curiosity.
And Senator Sotomayor, thank you for your question to you through Chair Scheibel. Yes, each of the stories that you've heard are from here in Nevada.
Appreciate that. That wasn't explained, and sometimes, as we know in these committees, we don't always get that information. How many counties are currently already doing what you've discussed? You indicated that Clark County has. I know that my counties, I know of at least 2 of the 4 that I represent, currently have a detectional system in place to try to help address issues that may have occurred, or to help also officers deal with problems that may be affecting them in some respect.
Thank you for the question, Senator Settlemyer. Unfortunately, I'll have to do a little bit of digging for you. I know that Las Vegas Metro has one. I'm not aware of any other in the state, but I wouldn't be surprised if Washoe also has an early warning system in place. But I will definitely dig and get back to you on that.
I appreciate that, Senator Harris. And in that respect, it might be a good thing I'm sure that potentially there might be out there, someone out there from the Sheriffs and Chiefs Association that might be able to help you acquire said answer. The last one that I really had is, if a person is pulled over and you're basically asking them to kind of fill out a form in order to assess this information to help with determinations, who will be the person determining the ethnicity? Will the person who got pulled over state that? Or, I mean, I'd hate, I sometimes look at somebody and I can't figure out whether they're Italian or whether or not, what their nationality is. So who will be giving said information?
Senator Settlemyer, that is a great question. As I was developing this, I saw myself posed with 2 options. Either I force police officers to ask people when they're stopping them, or I allow police officers to take their best guess. There's also an opportunity. Talk about inopportune.
At least it happened to you too.
Yeah, that's right. It will also be an opportunity to click the unknown button. But the way I saw this is we collect the data either by asking people, which puts police officers in a super uncomfortable position, or we allow police officers to give their best guess, or we don't collect the data at all. And I did not see that as a better alternative.
Could I make a suggestion? Maybe there's a compromise. Generally, sadly, I know, as on occasion in the past, I may have gotten a few speeding tickets or things of that nature, and the individual has to sign off on that ticket. Not that they're agreeing that they're guilty or innocent, but just sign off that they've got said ticket. Wouldn't it be appropriate to let them decide at that point in time whether or not they chose to click off that particular area on? Maybe that's an easier way to do it. I actually don't approve of either way of putting the officer in an awkward spot of asking, and I think it'd be completely improper for anyone to assume that they have that ability.
Senator Settlemyer, if you've got a better option out there, I am more than happy to take a look at it. I know that the state of Oregon has done this data collection. The state of California has done this data collection. And so I've committed to law enforcement agencies here in the state to connect them with partners in those states to develop the best practices for how we can get this done.
And in that respect, do you have any idea how those other states did it since you've been in contact with them? How do they do it? Does the cop determine, or does the person who's pulled over self-divulge?
I believe it's the former.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. I was just thinking maybe since we make people sign the form, when they get a offense, they could also sign whether they decline to give said information or whether they choose to. I don't know, just a thought. Thank you for allowing me to ask those questions, and thank you for the stories today.
Thank you. We will move next to Senator Hansen.
Thanks, Chair Scheibel. Boy, it's hard to know where to start. The whole concept of bias, one thing I've noticed consistently throughout law enforcement, there's an absolute strong bias, and it's a gender bias. I mean, we have overwhelmingly pulled over males, young males especially, of all races. And we look at our state prisons, disproportionately male. Yet our populations are half female and half male. Why are we trying now to suggest that our entire criminal justice system is biased against males? Because obviously there's a disproportionality there that is absolutely provable.
To you, Senator Hansen, through Chair Scheibel.
You can go direct.
Thank you. Happy to detect any bias in the system and address it in any way possible.
Well, what my point is the reason there's a bias is because males commit most of the crimes, and they're disproportionately young males. And when I'm driving down the road and I get some hot rod speeding by me every time, it's almost never a 55-year-old black or white guy. It's almost always some young kid, and it's almost never a girl. So when cops are pulling people over and we're seeing a disproportionality among races and in gender, did anyone ever consider that it might be the fact that those people are the ones that are committing a disproportionate share of the crimes?
And Senator Hansen, thank you for the question, because yes, we've considered it. And I do not believe there is any evidence that African Americans are more likely to speed in the same manner that there is evidence that males are more likely to speed, hence the higher insurance rate for males. The statistical numbers simply are not there, especially in the disparities that we see. And to imply that 6% of African American males, but 13% of or 15% of traffic stops is because they speed a bit more, clearly misses the mark there.
Perhaps, but I would also point out that when we look at all the stats of Nevada, there's almost a complete absence of Asians. In fact, whites are disproportionately singled out apparently by these biased cops, where for some reason, even though they're racist cops apparently and looking for people of color, they somehow overlook the Asians. If you look at the statistics, it's pretty clear that white people get disproportionately pulled over on a percentage basis compared to Asians. Are we going to suggest that the cops are more biased in favor of Asians than in whites?
Senator Hansen, it is not my intention to suggest anything. We're going to collect the data and let the statistical analysis bear out what it may. And so, I intend to look at all of these things. And actually, when I say I don't mean I mean someone much smarter than me who will be able to take into account all of the relevant factors, including increase in people in the city on a given day, time of day, all of the other multiple factors that can come in to get to a point where we can statistically say with a 99% confidence interval with a p-value less than 0.05 that bias is what is actually leading to this and not something else. And if the statistics don't bear that out, great. Then there's nothing that we need to do. But if it does bear it out, we have the ability to address it. And so, all of these other things that may be playing a part in how often people are stopped can be statistically accounted for, and that's what I'm looking to do.
I appreciate that. And Chair Scheibel, thank you for your indulgence. Here's the reality, though. This is an old issue, okay? They've been collecting this data for years, and their racial profiling on traffic stops when I came in as a freshman was a hot topic. I'm intrigued by the fact that you kind of said that Metro is doing the right job currently, and this won't even impact them. Yet the 20 cases that Ms. Nisa Zong mentioned were all involving Metro. And I'd also like to ask Chair Scheibel and Vice Chair Canizaro, you guys represent the District Attorney of Clark County. If there is a bias going on in Clark County with the police, are you guys aggressively prosecuting the cops that are the bad guys here? I mean, we've got two different sides here. We have the district attorney, who's one of the checks and balances in the whole system. Yeah, we have people suggesting that you had at least 20 cases of police violence. Were those cops that committed the police violence aggressively prosecuted by the existing district attorney?
Senator Hansen, I'll start if that's okay with you, Chair Scheibel.
Yes, and then I'll also have some comments.
Okay, I imagine so. Listen, we all have bias. Bias is not a crime. However, when you are a police officer, it can manifest in some different levels of harm to folks, right? Then it might manifest itself if you're a lone officer, let's say, okay? So I'm not looking to criminalize police officers who display some bias. I'm looking to cure it. I'm looking to offer them some kind of awareness about their bias, additional supervision, maybe additional training, whatever we need to do to try our best to address that issue. And when I mentioned Metro, what I mentioned Metro has is a early warning system. They've already got one in place, and I'm trying to make it clear it's not my intention that they create a brand new early warning system. None of us are doing our jobs perfectly. And so that was not my intention in that statement at all. Chair Scheibel.
Senator, I would like to ask real quick on that. I agree. I think everybody does have a bias, and I don't think it's limited to cops. It seems to me that some legislators have biases against law enforcement at the moment, frankly.
All right. And thank you, Senator Harris, for your answer. Since Senator Hansen did address a question to myself and the vice chair, I don't think that's appropriate during this hearing because it is Senator Harris's bill, but I would like to remind everybody that while I work for the District Attorney's Office of Clark County, when I am in Clark County, I do not represent the Clark County District Attorney's Office. I take an unpaid leave to be here chairing the Judiciary Committee, and while my experience there informs some of my knowledge in criminal law, I in no way represent the DA's office while I am here or any of their political positions. And with that, we will move on to the next set of questions, which will come from Senator Pickard.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel, and thank you, Senator Harris. I certainly appreciate the impulse to bring this bill. It's been in the news and in the discussions in this building since I've been here. I want to look at the bill itself and the language of the bill, and I want to make sure I understand first, when we say bias, and I'm talking in the context of this bill, do I understand correctly? We're talking about racial bias. We're not talking about bias against red hair or bias against black hair or bias against, body shape or whatever it may be. We're talking racial bias, correct?
Well, Senator Pickard, I'll be honest. If the early warning system detects an officer has a bias against people with dark hair, I don't want people with dark hair to be disproportionately affected by police violence either. I think what we might actually end up seeing, because there's very little evidence that that type of bias actually manifests itself in any meaningful way, is we'll likely see racial bias indicators kind of coming forward.
Okay, but do I understand then that yes, the bill is intended to look at racial bias, or we're looking at any bias that human nature might produce?
Well, Senator Pickard, I've put into the bill that the police departments are going to be kind of the experts on detecting what these bias indicators would be. And what type of corrective actions might need to be put into place. I don't see the language to specifically say racial bias indicators, but I believe history of America and of policing in America would suggest that that is the largest issue when it comes to what types of bias we're seeing.
Okay. Well, and I appreciate that. I'm just trying to figure out what kind of direction we're giving to law enforcement in the state through this language. But speaking of, I suppose, race-based decision-making or biases or any other, is the consistent use of that type of decision-making indicate a bias that needs a curative measure to be applied. Is that what I understood you to say?
Senator Dallas Harris, for the record, thank you for the question, Senator Pickard. What I mean to say is that we want to flag people who may be displaying bias, and yes, put some interventions in place before that bias manifests itself in some type of catastrophe for both the officer and for the people and families involved.
Yeah, and I appreciate your recognition that it does affect both sides. So I'm looking at, in section 1, I'm looking at the language, and have we defined, I didn't see anywhere where we've defined a large number, because you refer in each of these to a large number of something, and we haven't defined that. Is that going to be up to Metro to define what is large within their context?
Thank you for the question, Senator Pickard. Senator Dallas Harris, for the record, yes. To be honest, a large number may change depending upon the type of assignment you're on, or
Sure.
the beat that you walk. And so yes, this is, and again, note that it says, for example. And so these are some of the key things that I think law enforcement agencies should be looking at. But it's going to be up to them to do the finalities of that, right? In order to make it flexible enough for people who are involved in certain types of work. A large number may mean a different thing than for those who are just walking the beat.
Sure, and I guess where I'm coming from is that we're leaving to them a system that you're claiming is broken. We're leaving to them the ability to define what the parameters of measurement are within their system. So we're not giving them guidance as to what is a large number, or frankly, how any of these things indicate a bias. You know, you may have a number of car crashes, for example, that have to do with their vision, has nothing to do with bias. You know, large number of arrests that they've made with no charges being filed, when they have no control over those charges being filed. That's up to the district attorney's office to do. In fact, I know in at least one of the stories that we heard, as tragic as it is, the district attorney, Mr. Wilson, found that, I think, if I recall correctly, the words were, the officers had no choice. And so, you know, I don't see how that necessarily points to bias. And I'm not arguing that they shouldn't do it. I'm just saying that if we're going to take this on, we need to give direction. And if we don't give direction, I don't see how they change what they're currently doing, because we're not telling them how to change. So that's a thought. I guess it really boils down to the question, can we actually cure bias?
Working on it one bill at a time, Senator Pickard.
But can you legislate against human nature? That's, I mean, you said everyone's biased. I'm trying to figure out how to give these guys direction in a meaningful way. Because I agree, we need to do that. But we should do it in a way that gives them the direction they need to take the steps and not just be beating on them.
And Senator Pickard, this Dallas Harris, for the record, let me just first say, this is not a bill to beat on anyone, okay? Again, being identified by the system simply means you may be displaying some bias, and we're gonna get you some additional training. Now, can we cure bias everywhere? Absolutely not. But there is a mechanism here that says, listen, if you're flagged by this 4 times, we've gotten you some curative measures, maybe police work is not for you. Right? And so I don't anticipate that happening very often, but the goal here is not a punitive measure at all. And so if you have a lot of crashes and it's because you're blind, I'm very much sure that is not going to be the one thing that is going to get you some additional supervision and or training, right? These are meant to be multiple factors that considered together can throw up a red flag that would suggest this officer needs a little bit of help. This officer might have some bias that they need to address, and we want to get them that help. You know, Senator Pickard, we've time and time again required police officers to be trained on cultural competency and on diversity and how to manage people with mental illness, and you know, we've tried all of that. So let's give this a shot, right? Let's make sure that we have police departments having a system in place that can just simply raise a flag on officers who may need a little bit of additional help. That's all that this does.
Well, I appreciate that. I just think that I'll probably disagree with you to the extent that I think that on a whole, law enforcement does a remarkable work with the limitations and the scrutiny that they're given. And that extends to the district attorney's office too. I know Chair Scheibel and Vice Chair Canizaro work hard to protect the citizens of the state. And I think that I'm going to disagree that bringing this kind of attention, phrased the way it is and presented the way it is suggesting that law enforcement isn't doing a good job or isn't doing an adequate job. But I guess my last question has to do with why are we limited? I'm looking at section 18. Well, it starts with 17. You go through the collecting and reporting of the information in 18. It's to the extent that money is available, the department may contract with a third party to review the public information. If the premise, which is what I've heard you say, that all these things we've tried hasn't worked, why wouldn't we require an independent review of this data to see what law enforcement isn't seeing or what you think that they need to do differently? I mean, it's like me, when I do an appellate brief, I have 2 or 3 other attorneys look at it because they will see what I haven't seen. And yet there's no requirement except as money's available. Although with the Biden bucks that have come to the state over the past year, we've got more money than we've ever had in a 2-year period. I don't understand why we then leave that independent review up to chance.
Thank you for the question, Senator Pickard. This is Senator Dallas Harris for the record. I don't disagree with you that we need to have this review done, and it is very much my intention to get this review done. I am in discussions currently with a couple of folks who I think would be great for this statistical analysis. What you see in front of you is legislative language that we need in order to enable us to be authorized to enter into a contract with a third party, and to do so with a bunch of different funds that I'm working with DPS on securing.
All right, and I appreciate that. And I know, Senator, I know your heart's in the right place. You're trying to make things better. I don't question that at all. You and I may disagree on the method that we do it. I'm concerned about making sure they get the kind of guidance that they need to accomplish this. I think, when we talk about large number of citizen complaints, what if they're all Caucasian against a Caucasian officer? That's clearly not bias. And so I think we need to really look hard at the language and give them the guidance they need. Otherwise, this may be another exercise in futility like all the others you listed and thought that they didn't work. So anyway, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to ask the questions.
And Chair Scheibel, if you don't mind, if I could just do one quick follow-up, Senator Dallas Harris, for the record. It was not my intention to suggest that these trainings have not worked. It's simply to suggest we already have the requirements put into place. Right? So we've tried that. And again, I hope that we will be able to have officers who are flagged go back through those trainings if that is found to be the best kind of intervention, right? Maybe they simply need a refresher of some sort, but I could not in good faith bring forward a bill that would require officers to go through more training in this vein where we've clearly taken steps to do that already.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And it looks like Ms. Sun wants to weigh in as well. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to respond. I wanted to respond to Senator Hansen and also Senator Pickard.
And if you could just put your name on the record again.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I know it's repetitive.
Nisa Sun, NISSATZUN. I recall hearing Senator Hansen on a call about the domestic violence bill, asking about, what are the statistics, in regards to different communities. And this is really just no different. It's really a piece of legislation that's asking to aggregate more statistics. I'm not clear on all of the demographics that are in the current legislation, but just if white folks are being pulled over by white cops, that doesn't necessarily mean there isn't bias. There's also biases within racial groups. So it could be classist. It could be what kind of car you're driving. It could be how you're dressed, what your hairstyle is, right? So we know and we've seen in the work that we do that there is significant bias for houseless people in our city in Las Vegas by police officers being harassed because, and there have been legislation passed that is discriminatory towards houseless people. So, and then of course there's folks that suffer from mental illness who are exhibiting strange and odd behaviors. And I think the more statistics we aggregate, the more data we aggregate, the more we can learn and analyze how to improve policing in Nevada. So I just wanted to add that in there. And yes, all the cases that I mentioned are local cases impacted by Las Vegas Metro Police Department. I do encourage everyone to research local cases in Las Vegas and in Nevada to learn more about policing and how it looks in Nevada rather than looking at national cases that didn't happen here. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple questions as well, Senator Harris. The first is that I'm looking at the amendment that's posted on Nellis. That's what we're working from, right? Okay, you're nodding your head. So for the record, she's answering it in the affirmative. And it looks to me like in section 14, there is a definition of profiling that starts on page 8, which identifies some of the categories of bias that we would be looking at, like age, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, religion, homelessness, disability. And I wanted to confirm that while that applies specifically to one particular section of the bill, which is section 18, where we get the outside consultant to review the possible profiling, is it fair to take from that list a kind of general understanding of the kinds of bias that we're going to be looking for in this process?
Thank you for the question, Chair Scheibel. Senator Dallas Harris, for the record. I would suggest yes, that this is a great list, and for Senator Hansen's edification, you will also see political affiliation is on that list.
Thank you. And the second question that I have is more of a comment, but I appreciate that the early warning system has statistically been proven to be effective. And I can imagine, in fact, I don't have to imagine, being a member of law enforcement and struggling with this. And so I'm going to speak personally just for a minute that, my bias has been recognized in the past, and I have been accused of pretty much racism. I've been accused on Twitter. I've been accused in a court of law. I've been accused on Facebook. I've been accused in person. And it is a jarring and unpleasant experience, which I know does not compare to the actual oppression that people of color and people with disabilities and other communities face. The reason that I bring it up is that those experiences, I completely understand why law enforcement officers struggle to respond in a way that is productive, because it's emotional. I'm shaking right now talking about it because I'm ashamed. But what I see in this bill is that Senate Bill 236 literally takes the lightest touch possible. You're not calling people out on Twitter. You're not putting them on the record in a court of law. You're not posting a list in their front lobby. You are privately talking to one officer with actual data to say, hey, we noticed that over the last 6 months, these 10 things happened, or over the last year, this same thing happened 8 times, and you might not know this, but that's not normal. And I can't think of a lighter touch for an officer than that one-on-one conversation that is based on private, personalized information in order to make a change. And I want to know if that is the point of this legislation and the purpose of the early warning system. And just to confirm what I think you've already said, but bears repeating, that this is not intended to be punitive. It's not intended to pull that officer out of their normal line of duty and reprimand them, but to say, hey, you have this unconscious bias. I know it's not fun to talk about, and and maybe at first you will have trouble accepting it and recognizing it, but really we need you to take a look at this and either go through this cultural competence training or have the conversation with a particular officer, and it will be individualized to whatever the bias is, whether it's that, you tend to be harder on people of a certain race or people who speak a certain language. Maybe you are not good at communicating with people who have, certain disabilities or something like that. And then, you can be connected with the right resource to address the specific issue that officer is facing without any kind of penalty, without trying to shame them, without trying to embarrass them, but just trying to help them be better at their jobs.
Thank you so much, Chair Scheibel. Senator Dallas Harris, for the record, nail on head.
Thank you. Are there other questions from members of the committee? Not seeing any, we will move to testimony. I will point out that it is about 2 p.m. Like I said, we have to finish at 3 p.m. So I am going to allow a half hour of testimony in support, and then a half hour of testimony in opposition if there is a full half hour's worth, and then the same in neutral. And I'll keep monitoring the clock and let you know if any of that changes, but hopefully that will get us out of here by 3 or shortly thereafter. So Mr. Kyle, if you would please start allowing the people in support of SB 236 to queue up.
Yes, thank you, Chair Scheibel. To testify in support on Senate Bill 236, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to testify in support on Senate Bill 236, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 963, please press *6 to unmute yourself. Then slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Hello, members of the committee. My name is Yesenia Moya. That is YESENIAMOYA. I am an organizer with Mass Liberation Project, but I am also an impacted person. As somebody who lives in who has lived in a few of the zip codes where police officers are constantly filling up their quotas with racialized traffic stops, and as somebody who's been part of that system, who consistently gets tickets and gets pulled over and gets treated the same way each time, and as well as a witness to many, many traffic stops by many different friends, families, loved ones that have either resulted in incarceration, loss of livelihood, loss of death, loss of lives, and their loss of completely their entire family. We need this data. Officers need to know how they themselves impact the communities that they're in. If they're going to be doing this work and policing, they need to understand the history and what they themselves are doing, because at this point they fall into anonymity, and there's no accountability, and there's no place for us to go when, and when I say us, I mean the public, to go when we are being harassed and or mistreated by law enforcement. So I urge you to please pass SB 226. It is imperative to communities that have been marginalized and minoritized here in this state, and we need to do better because enough is enough.
Thank you, caller. And if you've just joined us this afternoon, we're currently on support testimony for Senate Bill 236. If you'd like to provide support testimony at this time, please press star 9 now to take your place in queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 346. Please press star 6 to unmute, then slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Reverend Michael Willoughby, Michael Willoughby. I am the Tech Director for Battleborn Progress, and I am proud to be here today on behalf of our organization to support Senator Harris and stand in solidarity with the Black, Brown, and Asian communities and all families affected by police violence and discrimination. I'm not only a reverend, I'm also the son of a cop. My dad gave nearly his entire adult life to protecting and serving the people of Bernalillo County. In fact, many of you have seen me proudly wear his buckle in your office. However, my father was a deeply imperfect man. Like everyone else doing any job, he was a regular person. The only difference is that he was empowered to change or end lives every single day. My dad was fortunate. He started his career in the post-Serpico era, and I believe he benefited greatly from the attention paid to ethics because of that. This bill is a step in that spirit. It will help good cops be better and help the folks who aren't cut out for it find out before there's another tragedy. But most importantly, it's something that we can do to stop the tide of Black men and women dying at the hands of law enforcement. As Senator Harris stated, we all have bias. We also all have a moral imperative to take action to correct things when we know they're wrong. Overwhelmingly, Black men and women are dying unjustly in the street, and each and every one of us knows it. Their lives matter. Black lives matter. Is there more bias out there? Yeah, doubtless. And this bill can accommodate that bias too. Please, I'm begging you, exercise your power and do something. Please support SB 236. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. And just a brief reminder, we're currently on support testimony for Senate Bill 236. If you've just arrived and would like to provide support testimony, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 683. Please press star 6 to unmute, then slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Rick McCann, R-I-C-K-M-C, capital C-A-N-N, and I am the Executive Director of the Nevada Association of Public Safety Officers, NAPSO, and a member of the Nevada Law Enforcement Coalition. I'm here today to support SB 236. My great thanks to Senator Harris and her staff for their tireless work to meet with stakeholders and conform their interests into what has become a very workable bill. This bill requires law enforcement agencies to establish early warning systems and to be guided by selected elements that are in this bill. That's not unreasonable, and it will require further dialogue with the law enforcement agencies to develop those policies. You know, dialogue's not a bad thing. We need more of it, quite frankly. Statistical analysis is not a bad thing. Obviously, it's all in how you use the data. We understand that. But for the foregoing reasons, we do support SB 236, and we encourage this committee to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Caller with the last three digits 541, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Ronald Najarro. That's R-O-N-A-L-D. Last name N-A-J-A-R-R-O. And I'm the State Director for Americans for Prosperity. Chair Scheibel and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify here today in support of SB 236, which establishes early warning systems and a system for the recording, collection, and review of information concerning traffic stops and other stops made by law enforcement officers. We believe this bill prioritizes transparency and accountability in a way that is critical to improving community trust. The early warning system provisions will help identify problematic officers, and the collection of stop data will help identify whether discrimination, intentional or unintentional, is occurring. Recent research reviewed 95 million traffic stops from 56 different police agencies found that Black drivers are more likely to be stopped by police and searched after being stopped when compared to white drivers, even though officers are less likely to find contraband when searching Black versus white drivers. These disparities continue to exist even when the researchers control the factors such as differences in driving behaviors and other potential variables that could cause such disparities. Police pull over more than 50,000 drivers on a typical day, more than 20 million motorists every year. This is the most common police interaction, and developing a way to track it in Nevada will provide crucial data for future reforms. On behalf of our over 96,000 activists across the great state of Nevada, we urge you to support SB 236. Thank you very much.
Thank you, caller. And as another reminder, we're currently on support testimony for Senate Bill 236. If you've just joined us and would like to provide support testimony at this time, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits 899, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin. Once again, caller with the last three digits 899, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Hello, my name is Lena Radney, L-Y-N-N-A-R-A-D-N-E-Y. My brother is Thomas McHenry. He was murdered by LVMPD within 1 minute upon arrival. Kyle Pryor, the same officer who murdered my brother, murdered another civilian, Pedro Ramirez, a year and a half later. He used the same excuse both times, stating his taser failed to work. These are real facts and real cases that could have possibly been avoided if there was a system in place. A system needs to be in place to determine these unconscious biases. In the 1920s, the NAACP started recording traffic stops for Black people. They presented this information to the federal government and noted how Black people were more likely to be harassed by the police. Their charges, what they were charged for was like BS and all this stuff. Here we are 101 years later, still asking for the same system to be in place. It is not our responsibility as civilians to keep account of the biases that officers have. It is the duty of the county. It is the state's duty. It's your guys' duty. It's the duty of LVMPD to account for their biases. There needs to be a system in place legally to account for these biases. It is not the public's responsibility to go on Google and fact check everything and fact check things for you guys. You guys need to take accountability and offer transparency to us for once. That is my support for this bill.
Thank you, caller. Caller with the last three digits 725, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Hello, and thank you, Chair Scheibel and committee members. This is Nick Shepak, N-I-C-K-S-H-E-P-A-C-K, with the ACLU of Nevada. We want to thank Senator Harris for her hard work on this bill and her commitment to engaging with stakeholders. We support SB 236 and the much-needed data it will provide. Being critical of government agencies, such as law enforcement agencies, and how their employees do their job and serve the public is healthy for a society. Government employees conducting their job in a racially biased manner is not. These two things are not the same. We often hear of bad apples in policing and that no one hates a bad cop as much as a good cop. An early warning system to identify bad actors in law enforcement should be welcomed by all. This type of system will not only help to protect the community, but allow law enforcement agencies to more effectively manage their departments. Our support of this section is by no means intended to indicate that we trust police departments to robustly police themselves. Law enforcement is notoriously bad at holding its own accountable and disciplining deserving officers appropriately. The implementation of this section will need to be closely monitored, and law enforcement agencies who fail to utilize this new tool effectively must be held accountable. We welcome the collection and the dissemination of traffic stop data this bill requires. We know that pretextual stops occur in the state and that drivers of color are far more likely to be stopped than their white counterparts. Every driver probably violates some provision of the vehicle code at some time during even a short drive. Because of this, it is very easy for the police to target a specific driver, following them until they make even the slightest mistake and then pulling them over. This data will help us identify over police communities and racial bias in the system. This data is critical to crafting effective reforms in the future. We also support the study and believe that crisis response call centers will become important parts of the public safety apparatus in the future. We thank you and ask you to support this bill and continue the discussion on police reform and accountability.
Thank you, caller. And as a reminder, we are currently on support testimony on Senate Bill 236. If you'd like to provide support testimony at this time, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 611, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. This is John Piro, Johnpiro, testifying on behalf of the Clark County Public Defender's Office and the Washoe County Public Defender's Office. In support of this bill, we'd like to thank Senator Harris for bringing this bill forward, and we are grateful for the measures that are being taken to examine bias and trying to root it out. What stays in the dark cannot be dealt with. It must be brought to the light, and that's what needs to happen. We fully agree with Rick McCann when he says dialogue and statistical analysis are not bad things, and that's what needs to occur for us to move forward. So we thank Senator Harris for bringing this bill forward to deal with certain things. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. And with that, Chair Scheibel, there are no more callers to give support testimony at this time.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Kyle. At the risk of redundancy, I just want to confirm that there is nobody else in the queue to give support testimony at this time.
Looks like we had one late arrival, Chair Scheibel. I will prompt them now.
No problem. In fact, let's have anybody else who's still on the line wishing to give support testimony go ahead and press *9. Is that correct, Mr. Kyle? Now to join the queue.
Yes, Chair Scheibel, that is correct. Once again, callers, if you've recently joined us and you'd like to provide support testimony for Senate Bill 236 at this time, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 771. Please press *6 to unmute yourself. Then slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Hello, my name is Leslie Turner, Leslie-Turner. And firstly, I just want to say Black Lives Matter. If that statement makes you uncomfortable, you should, one, take a look at an objective look at U.S. history, especially the history of legislation in this country, as well as in the state. And secondly, please investigate your own bias. If that makes you feel uncomfortable, then there's bias there. There's nothing radical nor unreasonable in this bill. This is actually the bare minimum: data collection and transparency. It's not a coincidence that some of the officers involved in shootings have been involved in multiple use of force incidents prior to that. It happened in the George Floyd case, which is at trial right now, and it's also happened here locally with Jorge Gomez. maybe their lives could have been saved if we would have paused and looked at problematic patterns. Every law enforcement agency should be in support of this bill. If law enforcement has nothing to hide, nothing to change, as is often depicted in these hearings, then they should be open to prove it to the community, to build trust. Further, if you want to build trust with the community, then you have to meet the demands of that community that doesn't trust you. What's done in the dark needs to come to light. It's been said before. And I continuously hear this kind of notion that we're here to build bridges with the community and we want to build trust between the community and law enforcement. Building trust means transparency and addressing patterns that have existed in this country for decades. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. And as another reminder, we are currently and still on support testimony for Senate Bill 236. If you've recently joined us or missed previous announcements, this is your chance to press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits 500, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair Scheibel and distinguished members of the committee. For the record, I am Juliette Robertson, Julliettete, Robertson, Roberson. I am a lieutenant with the Nevada Department of Corrections Employee Development Division. As our agency is in support of this specific bill, we have identified several bills requiring additional training for our staff. We are requesting the opportunity to prepare a quality, comprehensive training program and or modules that will incorporate all the bills that will encompass all topics and subjects as they relate to the social justice reform. This will enable us to ensure meaningful and adequate training and request necessary resources to facilitate both initial and continuous training so that we can adhere to this in all the bills for this session. With that being said, we do have some preliminary projections for blocks of training related to any specific subject. Feel free to reach out to us. Thank you very much, Honorable Committee.
Thank you, caller. And once again, we are currently on support testimony for Senate Bill 236. If you've recently joined us and would like to provide support testimony at this time, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. And Chair Scheibel, there are no more callers to give support testimony at this time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kyle, for all of your help. At this time, we have called on everybody who called in to give support testimony, and we appreciate every single one of you taking the time out of your day to share your thoughts with us. At this time, we will move to opposition testimony on SB 236.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in opposition on Senate Bill 236, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to provide opposition testimony on Senate Bill 236, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller, please slowly state.
Hello, Madam Chair, members of the committee. This is Chuck Callaway, Callaway, representing the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. We're here in opposition to SB 236 as written. We have had dialogue with Senator Harris, and as always, I appreciate her willingness to reach out and engage us in dialogue. And hopefully with the pending amendments, we can at least get to a point of neutral on this bill. Metro has used an early warning system for well over a decade. And data collection is very important in law enforcement, and this is no exception. But it does require a deep dive to evaluate the data. And just to give one simple example, an officer may be assigned to work in an area with a high concentration of a certain demographic of folks in that area. And so naturally, on average, conducting traffic stops in that area would show a higher percentage of folks of that demographic being stopped. So it's not enough to just look at the baseline data, and I believe this was a problem with AB 500. I also agree with the comments that were made that it's not appropriate for officers to be asking motorists their data, but it's also not appropriate to be guessing data. And I would recommend that data be collected through traffic citations that are currently issued and sent to the state. That's one mechanism where that data could be collected. There also could be potential costs associated with the data collection piece, and again, we're willing to work with the senator on that issue. In regards to some of the testimony that was made during the hearing, I kind of take a bit of offense to the term police violence. Police officers are out doing a very difficult job on a daily basis, and they react to the actions of suspects and people that they encounter on calls and on stops during the course of their duties. Anytime that someone dies in the custody of an officer, it could be regarding a heart attack or drugs in their system. If they're in police custody, the coroner's office rules that death as law enforcement being a contributing factor and will rule it a homicide, even though there may be other factors that play into that. I'm not aware of any homeless study in Clark County that shows that law enforcement is biased towards the homeless. In fact, our MORE team got over 700 people off the streets since they've been out operating, and we have a very robust program where we go out and assist the homeless with getting them off the street. So we are for data collection, we're for an early warning system, but we want to ensure that data is being collected and analyzed in the proper format. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. And as a reminder, we are currently on opposition testimony on Senate Bill 236. If you've recently joined the call and would like to provide opposition testimony at this time, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 196. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel and members of the committee. I'm Eric Spratley, E-R-I-C-S-P-R-A-T-L-E-Y, an Executive Director of the Nevada Sheriffs and Chiefs Association, here in opposition to Senate Bill 236, even with the amendment, and certainly appreciate Senator Harris working with all the stakeholders in such a thoughtful and considerate manner. The majority of the concerns for Nevada law enforcement leadership have been addressed with the amendment, and we appreciate that immensely. I do need to direct your attention to Section 13 and Section 16 of the bill or the amendment. The words in these sections, quote, or any other purpose, triggers the requirements of Section 17 and the data collection requirements of this section. So if a police officer stops a person walking down the sidewalk to hand him back his wallet that fell out of his pocket, that officer would then be required to further delay that person and the officer while he gathers the information for this data collection, and this would fall under, quote, or any other purpose per the current language of Section 13. Similarly, if an officer stops a vehicle to inform the lady that her coffee cup is on the roof of her car, that officer would then be required to further delay that person and the officer while he gathers the information for this data collection, even though it is not a traffic violation to drive around with your coffee cup on the roof of your car as long as it doesn't fall off. This scenario would fall under, quote, or any other purpose per the current language of Section 16. Similarly, in Section 1, this bill applies to each law enforcement agency per NRS 289010, which was broadened by SB 242 in the 80th session. And that, folks, is a lot of agencies that need to establish an early warning system. And while that might be the intent of the bill, it will apply to agencies per Section 12, which are numerous. Certainly in 289's 150, you've got sheriffs and their deputies who we think this should apply to. But then you've got tribal officers, persons appointed by the Supreme Court, security officers appointed by local governments under certain circumstances, special investigators of the Attorney General's office, criminal investigators of the Secretary of State, P&P officers, school police officers, officers employed facilities for detention for children, legislative police, Department of Corrections, California Corrections officers, all of these other things in 289 that would affect these agencies. We don't think that is the intent of the bill, but we tried to correct it in Section 983 of the 32nd special session, and this broad language really affects a lot of people negatively. So we do thank you for not considering this bill in its current form or amended version. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. And as a reminder for those of you who have just joined, we're currently on opposition testimony for Senate Bill 236. If you'd like to provide opposition testimony at this time, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 766, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
John Abel, Johnabel. I'm with the Las Vegas Police Protective Association. This is the second major bill involving law enforcement where Senator Dallas Harris has not reached out to the single largest police union in the state, the LVPPA, or the largest group of law enforcement unions, the Public Safety Alliance of Nevada. We have 2 objections to this bill. The outline states to recognize quote-unquote bias, yet several of the factors listed in the bill have nothing to do with any implicit bias such as accidents or when an officer calls in sick. If we had had some conversations with Senator Harris, she could have let us know how this doesn't add to work for the officers. We would not be opposed to this portion of the bill if we could show how officers have no newly added paperwork or documentation for an officer. Senator Harris, again make references to the disappropriate amount of stops on black males, yet a very large portion of car stops are observed from behind a vehicle, registration information, or vehicle law violations, which typically do not afford an officer the ability to even recognize the race of the driver. Also in Nevada, vehicle windows are often tinted and further keep an officer from recognizing particulars of occupants or their number of occupants. With regards to the people that Senator Harris is testifying, it appears she only has people speaking who are on the side, which appears to be anti-police. The woman who testified today, a member of the Forced Trajectory Project, lists the 40 demands by families united for justice. Number 7 on this list is to abolish unions, the LVPPA specifically, and under number 23, the resignation of Sheriff Lombardo. This does not seem fair. The statements of support like these the committee should be recognizing these groups their testimony is anti-police at best. Most people who are anti-police seem to consistently say their loved one or family or friend did nothing wrong and the police profiled them. While we feel for the families left behind after any deadly force encounter with police, testimony forgot to mention that Mr. Williams was under the influence of a controlled substance, had a heart attack recently, and just finished running approximately 1.5 miles when he was being chased by law enforcement. This is just some inflammatory testimony against police and the law enforcement community. You hear Senator Harris speak of NAPSO and MPU. To be clear, both groups are prominently run by civilians and not commissioned officers. Nevada Police Union represents roughly 700 officers. And almost done. And NAPSO's largest group is civilian personnel from LV and PD, not commissioned officers. These 2 groups should denounce this type of legislation, as I know their members probably aren't supportive of their unions.
That is 2 minutes. You're going to have to wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. And with that, Chair Scheibel, there are no more callers to give opposition testimony at this time.
All right, then we will move from opposition testimony to testimony in the neutral position on SB 236.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in neutral on Senate Bill 236, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to give neutral testimony on Senate Bill 236, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 294. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself. Then slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Chair Scheibel and members of the committee, for the record, Callie Wilsey with the City of Reno. That's CALLIWIL, S as in Sam, EY. We'd like to thank Senator Harris for including the City of Reno in the ongoing conversations on this bill and other criminal justice reform efforts. We appreciate the outreach and the opportunity to take part in these important conversations. The Reno Police Department has an early warning system in place. We find it a valuable tool for the reasons discussed today, and RPD will be able to comply with the provisions set forth in that section. Since this was a question brought up during the hearing, we wanted just to ensure that the committee had this information. We appreciate the bill sponsor's comments that additional conversations will occur related to the traffic reporting section. We understand the policy intent here and believe the additional discussion will help work through some of the logistical nuances in the language. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this information today.
Thank you, caller. Caller with the last three digits 841, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel, Senator Harris, and members of the committee. My name is Lisa Rasmussen, Lisarasmussen. I'm testifying on behalf of myself and my law firm today in neutral. I want to make it clear that I laud all of the efforts that Senator Harris has done to bring this bill forth. I know that she has worked with many in the community to get this bill to the place where it was. The only reason that I'm testifying in neutral instead of in support is because the provisions on qualified immunity were removed, and I thought that they were a step in the right direction. I think that I certainly would support the bill even without that, but the rules require me to testify in neutral because of my hesitation without those provisions. I think that the bill is necessary because it gives us data, right? We can't make policy decisions without data. Data is how we make smart, informed decisions. And so my support for that is not because I'm a cop hater, and probably other people who support it are not cop haters either. It's because we want actual information so that we can, as a body of people in the state of Nevada, make good, informed decisions going forward. So I think it's great. I really appreciate all the efforts of Senator Harris on this bill, and I think that the committee should support it. And I'm sorry to hear kind of some of the resistance from law enforcement who feel attacked, because I don't think that's the intent of the legislation at all. I think it's a good bill. My only hesitation is I think it could go farther. I think it could have addressed qualified immunity. But I think that what's there is a good start. I think it's a good starting point. Thank you, and I yield my time back.
Thank you, caller. And if you've recently joined us this afternoon, we are currently on neutral testimony for Senate Bill 236. If you'd like to provide neutral testimony at this time, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits 449, please press *6 to unmute yourself. Then slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Hello, Chair Scheibel and the committee. My name is Elizabeth Neighbors. I am the Forensic Director for the Division of Public and Behavioral Health, and I am here today representing them. I would just like to thank Senator Harris for our dialogue with her and wanted to share that in light of the amendments, the Division of Public and Behavioral Health will be removing its fiscal note on this bill in its entirety. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Caller with the last three digits 111, please press *6 to unmute yourself. Then slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel and members of the committee. For the record, I am Patrick File. That's Patrickfile. I'm president of the Nevada Open Government Coalition. We're testifying as neutral on SB 236 today. We've expressed some concerns about the breadth of the confidentiality provisions in the bill. We're confident that if the amendment is accepted, it will ease those concerns. So thank you to Senator Harris and the committee for your work on this bill.
Thank you, caller. Caller with the last three digits 647. Please press *6 to unmute yourself. Then slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin. Once again, caller with the last three digits 647. You are unmuted. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin. Once again, caller with the last three digits, 647. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin. With that, Chair Scheibel, that caller is unresponsive, and with that, there are no more callers to give neutral testimony at this time.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Kyle. I would encourage anybody who had technical difficulties to submit their testimony in writing to the committee. And with that, that does conclude our hearing on SB 236. I will now close the hearing on SB 236. Before we move to our last item on the agenda, I do want to make do some brief housekeeping and remind those of you listening in that here in Senate Judiciary, we do not have rules about where you can testify in terms of neutral support or opposition, and we both expect and trust people calling in to use their judgment to align themselves with the position that best fits where they stand. So if you want us to pass the bill, testify in support. If you don't want us to pass the bill, testify in opposition. If you really don't care, testify in neutral. And with that said, we will move on to the last item on our agenda, which is public comment. Broadcast, do we have anybody wishing to give public comment?
Thank you, Chair Scheibel. If you'd like to provide public comment this afternoon, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, we are currently on public comment, and if you'd like to provide public comment this afternoon, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits, 647. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin. Once again, caller with the last three digits, 647. I do see that you are unmuted, so if you can hear me, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to give public comment and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Scheibel, Senator Harris. My name is Nathaniel Phillips, Nathaniel Phillipps. I had a few brief comments. I certainly do appreciate Senator Harris's work in bringing this bill to the floor. And I'd like to respond to a couple points that have been raised and speak from my heart. Number one, we already know that bias exists in the system of policing and the criminal justice system writ large in this country. The entire system is predicated and was founded on both implicit and explicit bias, from police forces catching escaped enslaved people to police forces busting unions in the North. We know that bias is tolerated and excused in policing unlike no other industry almost, but bias with a gun and with the full force of law can have devastating and or lifelong consequences. So what are two facts about bias that we unequivocally know? We know that in Nevada and nationally, Black people are killed at 2 times the rate of white folks. We also know that in the Mountain West, which includes Nevada and our surrounding states, this region has the highest rates of police killing. And among the Mountain West region, it is actually Nevada that has the highest rates of police killing per capita in the entire country. But we cannot be sidelined or distracted by the spectacle of violence that is police shootings. Violence happens and occurs in all aspects of policing. When a police officer kills someone is the most spectacular one. So we should not lose sight of all the other ways that police can impact violence upon our community. It's troubling to me that officers would not be held accountable for the bias that they demonstrate. Training for causing violence or causing harm on a resident, on a civilian, is not necessarily accountability. So I believe those measures should be stronger. And just to respond to some of the comments from the law enforcement members that were kind of silly and superfluous, again, wanting to hold agents of the state, people that are empowered by the law and also paid by public tax dollars, to not enact violence upon other people is not anti-police. In fact, it's anti-violence. And police violence is certainly a real thing. And sadly, it's indicative of the culture, the incredible culture of violence in American society. So it's no wonder we live in it's no wonder we living in an incredibly violent, racist, and classist society that we would see that violence redirected within policing. Thank you so much for hearing my comments.
Thank you, caller. And as a brief reminder, we are currently on public comment. If you'd like to provide public comment this afternoon, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. And Chair Scheibel, the phone lines are open and working. However, there are no more callers to give public comment at this time.
All right. Thank you so much. And with that, I'm just confirming the scheduling thing. And I do also, actually, while I wait for that confirmation, I do want to thank again our presenters who testified before us today and presented SB 236. We really do appreciate you being here and taking the time to talk to us today. And we appreciate Senator Harris bringing the bill and everybody who participated in this process. As always, it is my honor to chair this committee, and I get to do it again tomorrow at 1 p.m. But until that time, we are adjourned.